A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a pleasant afternoon to everyone. So I am Baimonesa C. Ada, your second reporter, and my task here is to discuss with you the role of philosophy of education. A philosophy education represents answers to questions about the purpose of schooling, a teacher's role, and what should be taught and by what methods. The ways of conceiving education coupled with multiple fields and approaches of philosophy make philosophy of education not only on a very diverse field but also one that is not easily defined. Philosophy of education gives us a comprehensive explanation of diversity and individual differences among our students and other people in terms of values, cultures, traditions, and other practices that a way of helping teacher in understanding why this student behave like this, why he/she responds like that. Through the concept derived from the different philosophies of education, the educational system has gone through different development and contribute in improving and directing the education to a new level of understanding. We all know that every child is different from one another, so that's why philosophies of education are formulated and developed so that we can make use of them, applied in our teaching approaches and strategies to make teaching and learning process takes place. There were multiple fields of philosophies of education are widely used and practiced in the world, but this doesn't mean that the context of one philosophy in other country is successful and effective. So in the other country will have the same effects on the teacher and on the students. The use of these philosophies varies depending on the economic status, the cultures, the tradition, and the practices that every country has. These philosophies must fit in the context of every learning environment of the students so that the needs of students will be addressed. Remember that there is no one philosophy that fits all. There is no perfect philosophy. It's only just a matter of how it can be utilized by the teacher for the learning development of their students. Next, so let's discuss the role of the philosophy of education in different ways. So first here is determining the aims of education. Philosophy of education guides the process of education by suggesting suitable aims for the diversities of life and selecting the means accordingly. Philosophy is the overarching principles of one school because it is the basis of every school's beliefs in. Example, in an Islamic school, their philosophy will reflect their beliefs, and their teachings approaches is anchored through the practices of Islam and teachings from the Quran. Although the curriculum that is being used is also anchored to the K-12, there is also an integration of the philosophy of school without modifying the standards that the DepEd wants to achieve. Example, in teaching physical education class, the students are required to do several performance tasks such as dancing, basic skills executions, and the like. But see to it that the principles of Islamic school is not compromised. Therefore, in every PE class, female students are required to wear their hijab, wear long sleeves in their performances during PE class. The aims of education of every school is reflected on their mission, vision, and goals to address the different individual differences of the students so that a suitable means of teaching can be applied accordingly to their underlying principles. Next here is harmonizing old and new traditions in the field of education. In the process of social development, the old traditions become outdated for the people. They are replaced by the new traditions. This process of replacement is not always smooth. It is faced with lots of oppositions from certain orthodox sections of the society. The philosophy of education is very helpful on the construction of curriculum according to the needs, abilities, and interests of our learners. In this way, the process of the teaching and learning varies to the trends and what is the most suitable learning strategies and approaches to our learning environment and the nature of the subject. Through that, we are able to acknowledge the different methods of teaching, such as learning by doing, lecture method, experimental methods, and others. There were practices from old accounts that is still functioning and effective in today's generation, but there were some that is no longer effective and functioning in the field of education. Always remember that change is the only constant in this world. Always learn to adapt and adjust. Curriculum must be flexible, varied, and progressive in the sense that it tries to meet the needs of the developing child and stimulate motivation, interest, and attention, as well as the demands of ever-changing modern society. Next here is, it also provides the educational planners, administrators, and educators with a progressive vision to achieve educational development. Philosophy of education provides the educational planners, administrators, and educators with the right vision which guides them to attain the educational goals efficiently. Education is life and not a preparation for life, which is based on the idea that education is not learning alone but it is living. With that, educational planners must think of what context of knowledge and skills applies for lifelong learning. The administrators must have a clear vision of what principles and disciplines they have to acquire and adopt for an educational institution. The philosophy as well determine the role and quality of teachers, educators pertaining to the needs and interests of the learners to provide a quality education and build a harmonious relationship with one another. To achieve the educational goals efficiently, the philosophy of education must be well defined, interpreted, and implemented through time to have a progressive learning environment and produce graduates or students who are equipped with knowledge and skills they can use for their daily activities in the general scheme of life. Next is preparing the young generation to face the challenges of the modern time. Philosophy of education is a guiding, steering, and liberating force that helps young people and the society at large to face the challenges of the modern time. Society is not static, it changes from time to time. Because of that, one must be adaptive to change to get easily find solution to challenges and problems that can be encountered in the society. Society is well diverse. Every society is unique to one another. Therefore, philosophy in life and in education is a guide for us to face these challenges in the modern era. Through philosophy, an individual is able to draw a line between his needs and his wants and prioritize what is the most important task and what is not, and develop a critical thinking reasoning to come up with a decision pertaining to life in a diverse society. Promoting the total growth of the child is made the aim of education, which is based on the philosophy that the growth means growth in knowledge, growth in habits, growth in skills and abilities. This is a continuous process. This continuous process is relative to the development of the child of all or our students that is anchored to the 21st century skills, so that he or she will not have this strangeness feeling of what is happening in his or her society. That is why evaluation or assessment is made an important part of teaching and learning, for us to recognize individual differences based on the principle that each individual is unique, in which calls for the adjustment of the subject matter and activities given to the learners. Furthermore, education is more practical and functional. The instructional method and learning environment must also gear in the social, political, and economic aspect of the individual's life. So, the role of philosophy of education can be in school, in the teacher, and in the student. So let's discuss first the role of philosophy in school. Behind every school and every teacher is a set of related beliefs, a philosophy of education that influences and what and how students are taught. According to old concept, schools serve as a shop for selling knowledge. Everything was pre-planned in advance. Teachers were concerned with the input and bothered little about the output. Modern concept of education regards schools are a miniature of society, laying emphasis more on output in comparison with input. So that is the difference between the education based on the old accounts and in modern times. In the K-12 curriculum, schools must produce graduates with the mastery of the basic competencies. They also have to be socially aware. They are proactive. They must be globally competent, be adequately prepared of the world of work or entrepreneurship or higher education and others. So with that, schools must meet these standards and able to utilize different approaches and make use of philosophies to come up with graduates and students who are 21st century ready, where thinking and reasoning skills is developed and practiced. So that is the main focus or the role of philosophy in every school. Next here is the role of philosophy of education in teacher-centered basis and student-centered basis. So in teacher-centered basis, philosophies tend to be more authoritarian and conservative and emphasize the values of knowledge that have survived through time. Teacher-centered, in the old education, teachers are the top of the educational process, while in modern times, a teacher is considered as a friend, a philosopher, and a guide to the students. The major teacher-centered philosophies of education are essentialisms and perennialism. So I will not discuss with you the concept of essentialism and perennialism because there are specific persons to discuss it with you. So on the other hand, schools is seen as the institution that works with youth to improve society or help students realize their individuality. So student-centered philosophies are more focused on individual needs, contemporary relevance, and preparing students for a changing future. The nature of child is made the center of educative process. This means that the child's needs, interests, abilities, and purposes must be taken into consideration. The child is viewed as an active element whose purpose is to live and grow. According to old concept, the child was a mere passive recipient of whatever the teacher instructed. But in modern education, the child is the center of the learning process. The entire educational process is to cater his needs, his interests, his attention, and develop him according to his nature. So he is to interact actively with the teacher and his classmates to achieve effective learning, promoting his own development and the development of the society in which is an integral part. So one of the major philosophies of education that is student-centered are pragmatism and existentialism, something has to do with the students are going to play this, they're going to perform this, the teacher is just a guide, and so on and so forth. So that's all for my report. So that was the role of philosophy education. So if you have some questions and queries, we will cater that after the last reporter. Thank you, and wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuhu.